the three of us will introduce and explain the challenge, and we're excited to do that. In a nutshell, Colorado River Basin Water Scarcity Challenge, we will, over the next 4 months, engage with organizations in the region to identify, wait, Matt, go back, please. To identify solutions to water scarcity challenges. We will select up to 3 promising projects, and then Quantified Ventures will work with the sponsors of those projects to get those projects designed, capitalized, and launched. So that's the challenge in a nutshell. We're going to introduce Quantified Ventures and explain the challenge in detail over the next hour. So the agenda for today, just framing the challenge, which is around water scarcity, and I'll do that, and then I'll explain a bit more about who Quantified Ventures is and what we do. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jason to give you examples of our work so you get a better idea of what it would mean to work with Quantified Ventures and the benefits of that and what it would mean for your projects. And then we'll turn it over to George, who's going to explain the details of this challenge, the process, how to apply for it, and then the specifics of working with Quantified Ventures. So the three of us will present over the next 30-35 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A period. That'll be open. You can just raise your hand and ask questions, or as we go through the slides over the next half an hour, feel free to type in questions in the chat box, and we'll make sure that those get addressed. So that's the agenda. Next. So we're framing this challenge around water scarcity, and we see an opportunity to identify, prioritize, and advance cost-effective solutions, both for water demand management and supply enhancement. We want to advance and launch those projects by leveraging, pooling, securing funding and financing, and we really want to focus on and scale projects that are impactful and deliver benefits to a wide range of communities. So that's the focus. I'll explain what Quantified Ventures does in more detail in a minute, but in a nutshell, we're a B Corp corporation. We work as both an advisory and a project development firm, and our role is to help design projects, get them capitalized, and then scale them. And we're really focused on securing funding and financing for projects in both the environmental and health arena that deliver an ROI and deliver impact to communities. We have an environment and resilience group and a health and human services group, and we work in different areas. One, forestry and land use, developing recreation projects, reforestation and land conservation, agriculture. We're promoting regenerative agriculture practices that deliver water quality benefits and carbon sequestration. Urban and coastal resilience, securing financing for green infrastructure and other types of projects that address stormwater management and other types of urban resilience challenges. And then finally, health and human services, where our main focus is scaling programs that address social determinants of health. There are significant challenges in the Colorado River Basin around water supply and demand, and many of you, you live this. I live in Colorado, George does as well, and many of you, this is your main focus professionally. Over the past many decades, the supply of water from the Colorado River is less than the amount of water that's being used in the basin, and the forecasts are that that challenge will only worsen over time. So this challenge is really meant to address that water scarcity. I'm loath to use the word challenge a second time, but we have a water scarcity challenge, and we have the challenge that Quantified Ventures is running. And what we're focused on is really catalyzing solutions that are both cost effective and scalable, and that address demand management as well as supply enhancement, and deliver benefits to a wide range of communities. And through our selection process, we really want to get a dialogue going amongst organizations who are focused on identifying and advancing projects that address that challenge. And then ultimately, we will select through a competitive process a minimum number of 3, and we will then work with the sponsors or implementers of those projects in order to further design them, get them capitalized, and get them launched. And we're fortunate to have funding from both the Walton Family Foundation and the Gates Family Foundation, and that funding is enabling us to undertake this outreach and selection process, and that funding will support the work of Quantified Ventures with the project teams. And effectively, you'll get a couple of experienced individuals from Quantified Ventures who will work with you over about a 12-month period for a good chunk of their time to advance your project. And as George will explain a bit more in detail, the selection process, it's not a very complicated rule-based government procurement. It's more meant to be a dialogue amongst your organizations and with QV, and we're really just looking to identify projects that would really benefit from our support and would be ones that could be replicated and scaled across the Colorado River Basin. The challenge model is one that Quantified Ventures has deployed a number of other times. This would be our 6th regional challenge. And overall, we found it to be a really effective way to get organizations to start collaborating, to build networks, and to surface projects that are really promising, and that if they were funded and financed, could be further scaled and replicated elsewhere. And effectively, for each challenge, we partner with a philanthropic organization. They fund the selection process, they fund our work with the selected projects. We identify either a region, or a particular region in the country, or we hone in on an issue that we're trying to address, like water scarcity, and then we select projects around that. And we've run challenges with the Rockefeller Foundation, focusing on their 100 Resilient Cities program, for urban resilience challenges in the Mississippi River, the Great Lakes, and the Chesapeake Bay region. We're currently working on a challenge in Texas focused on water scarcity and other issues. And many of the more notable projects that Quantified Ventures has advanced have come through these challenges. So for example, some of our environmental impact bonds that were issued to finance green infrastructure in a number of cities like Atlanta and Buffalo and Memphis, those came out of challenges. Jason will talk in a bit more detail about those projects later. A green mortgage financing in New Orleans came out of a challenge. And then we have a number of projects currently underway in Texas that are focused on water scarcity. And some of these projects you'll hear about later, but overall, we found this to be a really good model to advance projects that are really promising in solving some challenging environmental issues in the country. So who is Quantified Ventures? Or what do we do? And what would you get from working with us? So again, we're a B Corp. So we're a business, but because we're a B Corp, we're mission oriented. We're looking to make an impact through our work. Overall, we work as an advisor to others implementing projects, or we develop projects for ourselves. We partner with pioneering organizations, and our role is to design, capitalize, and scale investable solutions. And what investable means that the solutions deliver outcomes that are worthy of spending money on, or the outcomes deliver revenue or cost savings, which would enable that funding or financing. And through those projects, we're really focused on making an impact on people and the planet. So that's QV, and what that means practically: design, capitalize, and scale. So design will take an idea or an initial concept or plan for a project and really flesh out the details, in terms of what would be the project scope and the implementation approach and the governance model. We'll do a feasibility analysis, meaning we'll prove the cost benefit case for a project to make sure it's worthy of investing in or spending money on. We'll identify the outcomes of a project and value those as part of making a cost benefit case, and also as part of identifying the revenue streams that would support any financing to provide the upfront capital for a project. Once that design has been done and the project is deemed feasible, we'll work to secure the capital that's required to launch the project. So in engaging with partners, with investors, putting partner and investor agreements together, identifying sources of capital, which could be government appropriations or grants, public financing opportunities, as well as accessing the capital markets. Will, as part of securing that funding and financing, we'll identify repayment streams, and then we'll identify or develop a plan to verify the outcomes of the project, which would trigger any payments. Some examples of how we capitalize projects: we've worked with local government to issue bonds. We've accessed SRF loans and grants for projects. We've been able to secure funding for projects through government appropriations or large grant programs. We've structured funds for land acquisition, or for example, paying farmers to implement various agricultural practices. And then finally, we'll scale our work, which could mean replicating some of the financial structures that we've been successful in implementing, which could mean doing more environmental impact bonds across the country, or we'll scale a fund or a project that we've helped capitalize. And you'll hear about some of these examples from Jason in a minute. We're fortunate to work with lots of amazing organizations across our work. So we're have partnerships and relationships with lots of government organizations at the federal, state, and local level. We work with many environmental organizations, environmental advocacy groups or foundations. Our health and human services group partners with nonprofits, with health providers, with health insurers. Many foundations fund our work, and we also work with corporations. For example, Cargill, who you see named there, they're a purchaser of carbon offset credits that are being generated from some of our agricultural work. So that's Quantified Ventures at a high level and the challenge at a high level. And I'm going to turn it over to Jason now, who will get into some more details about case studies from our work.
Thanks, Todd. And Matt, if you could go ahead and go to the next slide. Again, I'm Jason Lee. I'm a director at Quantified Ventures, and I'm going to be talking about 3 specific case studies, one each on design, capitalize, and scale, and hopefully give you all a little bit more concrete of an idea of what are some typically some of the typical roles or tasks we do with our clients and partners on these projects. And so the first one I want to talk to you all about is with the Edwards Aquifer Authority and their Next Generation Aquifer Program. This is a project that we're just now closing out. We're really excited about this one, particularly because it has a lot of implications for the Colorado River Scarcity Challenge, Water Scarcity Challenge. And the top line description of what this is we helped them create a new program and launch a new program that forms a partnership between themselves as a groundwater management agency and agricultural water users. And we did that by designing a specific innovative kind of groundwater easement. So, drafting up the documents, we helped them structure and launch a new type of easement that goes on the groundwater itself and not the land. Enrollees are paid a lump sum by the Edwards Aquifer Authority upfront for the easement, for purchasing that easement, and then there's potential for ongoing revenue from the agricultural water holder from lease revenue sharing dividends. The thing that was really important to us when designing this was that water users will retain ownership of the water itself, and it's only in specific cases, tailored cases where EAA as the groundwater management agency can control that water, particularly when aquifer conditions are approaching drought. Now I'll go over that in a little bit more detail in a second. Our role in this is when we launched the project with them, was it like 14 months ago? It was just kind of a vague idea of we want something new. Our current program options are pretty heavy-handed or they're really expensive, and we want something that's a little bit more innovative and cutting edge and efficient in achieving our program objectives and under our specific constraints as a groundwater management organization. And we took that broad mandate and we did a gauntlet of stakeholder and expert interviews, tried to get a better handle of what are some of the enabling conditions, what is possible, what are the best practices that are out there. And we came up with this aquifer responsive win-win transaction design. And again, I'll go over that in a little bit more detail on the next slide. And in order to fine tune that, we put our financial expertise to bear and built a financial model that served as both a decision-making tool and helped them calibrate an easement price that was more cost efficient than their current program alternatives, but also gave an attractive incentive for agricultural water users to enroll. And then we packaged all that up and we delivered a presentation for approval from the board of directors from the organization. So the result of this, again, we're really pleased by this. This particular method of water control is going to cost about a quarter of what it would take to do a quote buy and dry, which is outright purchase of water. And again, this one allows the agricultural water user to retain control of their water in a majority of years and receive financial compensation in forbearance years. And then the most important thing for us is that our client, the Edwards Aquifer Authority, they gained an additional tool to manage drought. So again, this was in part of our, in that design, capitalize, and scale, this design phase was to help them say, we have kind of a seed of an idea. We're not really sure what this is going to look like, where it'll go. We know we want it to have these innovative financial features, and they brought us in. Our work with them was supported in a very similar way through some family foundations who are interested in innovative approaches to water management in Texas. And so we came in and helped them design this program and launching in pilot phase this summer. Next slide, please. Here is a graphical representation of what this looks like, and this is a rendition of a monitoring well, and the monitoring well, it's a specific well in the aquifer that is going to be used as a reference for what easement, what actions are possible under the easement. So again, when aquifer levels are high, there isn't a ton of need for groundwater management, and so the agricultural water user retains control and use of that water in 70% of years. And that allows them to use water in the ways that they want. It, they can sell water, lease water. Well, they can sell the water with the easement going along with it, right? They can lease the water, or they can ask the groundwater management district to broker leases for them, and then pass through the lease revenues. And so that brokerage function is something that we thought was really interesting, just because it makes that market for water a lot more robust and liquid. Where things get really interesting is when the aquifer levels start to decline to the point where under hydrological analysis, it's going to approach severe drought soon. And so when that monitoring well level starts to hit that kind of warning zone, this is when this easement program functions as a pump the brakes tool, where the groundwater management district can survey all the water rights that are enrolled in this program under easement, and then forbear a certain portion and lease out a certain portion according to what they think is the right level of control to pump the brakes and avoid further drought. And then the leased out portion, those lease revenues are pooled and then distributed out as lease revenues for all participating agricultural water users. So again, that ongoing revenue stream not only provides irrigators more financial benefits from participating, but also helps lower the price for purchasing the easement for the groundwater management district. And the final scenario here is when aquifer levels are extremely low and the region is in severe drought. Then all enrolled water, all the water that's under easement enters forbearance for that particular year. So again, this aquifer responsive easement design is something that we're really excited with to have come up with EAA. And this, whether or not it's this particular structure or another kind of creative easement structure, I think is something we're really interested in playing around with further and innovating and building on with potential partners in the Colorado Basin. Next slide, please. Example number 2 is in the capitalization or capitalizing bucket. And I'm going to talk about municipal bonds. So for those of you that aren't totally familiar with how those work, you can kind of think of it like a loan that a municipality takes out for public works projects, water infrastructure, schools, health centers, libraries, that kind of thing. And, there are a lot of municipalities out there that are doing, or it could be counties, states that are funding projects with environmental and social impacts, that benefit people and planet. And we help them access more investors. So again, they've gone through the design phase. They know what projects they're going to fund, typically some type of innovative water project. They know, or land project, they know what their financial strategy is going to be, but they want that little bit of extra juice. And so we work with them to say, we're going to help you access more investors, particularly investors that are interested in funding and supporting environmental and social projects. And so we help them turn their regular municipal bond into an environmental impact bond. And you can think of that like putting an organic label on an avocado. It doesn't change the underlying avocado, but it signals to potential buyers that, hey, there's something extra good about this one. And so you're able to charge a premium for it. We help the municipality, again, we're only a part of the team here. They have the design function already handled. They have their lawyers and their transaction team, and we come in as technical consultants, and we generate what are the outcomes that are going to be coming out of these funded projects. How are you going to measure them? How are you going to evaluate them? We do some quantitative analysis around here's your projected outcomes, And then we write all that up, we wrap up all that environmental and social impact narrative we translate that into legalese and financialese to get stapled to the back of that bond offering document. And that helps get investors. It kind of raises the flag for investors interested in environmental and social investments to buy this particular bond. And we've been really successful in helping to increase demand. And in a lot of cases, we've had the banks we're working with say that they were able to lower the interest rate because of that extra demand pressure that came from the work that we did. And so, in this case, we're helping a client, in this case, municipalities that are looking for bond financing. They've already have the projects designed. They have a capital raising strategy, but we're helping to enhance that by marketing to impact investors through all the work that we do. And this one's been particularly successful. Over $200 million in EIB capital closed or in structuring around the country. And some of the ones are Buffalo. That one actually won the I think it was the it was the Water Now Deal of the Year, and I think also Bond Buyer Small Innovative Deal of the Year this past year. Washington D.C. won Environmental Finance Deal of the Year. New Orleans, that one's a really interesting one that we just launched and we're going out and soliciting investment for now. Also Atlanta and Hampton. And so you can see kind of a wide spectrum. The important thing for us here is that the municipality or county that we're working with or financing authority that we're working with has a really charismatic, innovative environmental or social project that we then work with their financing and legal teams to take it to that extra next level. Graphically, for those of you that are more a circles and arrows guy or gal like I am, here's how an EIB works and how it's different than a typical bond transaction. In a typical bond transaction, you have your issuer, which is the municipality or county. They go out and solicit investment from Wall Street, and then they take that money that they borrowed from investors and go out and do the public project, water project, land conservation, school, pipe repair, whatever it might be. But that's kind of where the bond transaction stops. It's very rare that a municipality will go out and actually measure the outcomes of those projects, and that's where the EIB comes in. So everything in the blue there, we set up everything where we help the municipality say, how are you going to measure these? What are the outcomes? So if you're going out and you're building a new reservoir, or you're updating your pipes and your water treatment plant, or you're building a new water renewal facility, what actually are the outcomes? What are you planning to get, and how are you going to be upfront and accountable and transparent with that? That in turn attracts impact investors who say, hey, this is a great project. We're really interested in investments that have credible and quantified outcomes, and we want to help invest in those. And so they join the typical Wall Street suspects in bidding on the bond, which again increases demand pressure and in a lot of cases can help lower interest rates. And then finally, once the project is implemented and the outcomes get measured and quantified and reported, then all the different stakeholders, community members, media, they come and say, how you took out $200 million in public debt 5 years ago. What happened to that? And the city can come and say, here's what actually happened. We went and sent engineers out and we measured this many gallons of water savings. Here's what it means in terms of water resilience for our city or our county. And this model, I think, that completing that feedback loop and adaptive management loop has been really powerful for a lot of issuers, and they get a lot of positive attention out of it as well. Next slide, please. And so the final example that I'm going to be talking about is scaling, and I'm going to be talking about our agriculture work, the Soil and Water Outcomes Fund. And this one was a project, again, in that theme of design, capitalize, scale, where when we came on, we had some idea of what this project would look like. So design bucket, check. Capitalization, there was some idea of how to fund this, but the funding wasn't in a format or in a way where it could actually become, dependably self-sufficient or self-sustaining. The model there was, I think, something that's familiar to a lot of people on this call is let's just go write a bunch of grant RFPs and see what we win. Some years we might win, some years we might not win, and we're gonna have to hit pause. We were really interested in how do we find a way to scale this into a smooth, self-sufficient, financially self-sufficient operation to generate real outcomes. So stepping back, what was the project? It's a private sector revolving fund, is what it ended up being, to provide incentive payments for agricultural landowners to implement conservation practices, best management practices that sequester more carbon, promote aquifer infiltration, promote cleaner runoff, water quality improvement, that regenerative ag, that stewardship of the land ethic that it turned out a lot of these agricultural landowners actually know about and care about. It just financially doesn't pencil for them. And so this fund was about closing that gap through incentives. And we built this fund, and I'll talk about that, how we did that in a bit. The outcomes are quantified and verified using USDA approved models. So in water sampling, we have dudes in trucks going out and verifying that the practices were done and outcomes were achieved. And then we take those outcomes that are verified and quantified, and we sell those to outcome payers in both public and private sectors. A big chunk of those buyers are water quality buyers who are interested in reduced nitrogen and phosphorus, and another big chunk are carbon buyers, especially from the private sector, trying to meet corporate supply chain sustainability goals. And so our role in this was, when we stepped in, our partner, who was a nonprofit ag industry organization, said, hey, we have like a couple farmers here and there who are doing stewardship practices, but we really are interested in how do we scale this up? How do we do more than just a one-off demonstration project here and there? And so we help them think through, how do we systematize pilot projects? How do we aggregate and band together and to a scale that kind of makes sense? And then if you're going out and thinking about a sustainable financial stream, like literally what are the organizational structures you need to have in place to be eligible to receive that kind of capital? And then what does that capital look like? How are the funds going to flow? And then we went out and raised this blended stack of public and private capital. It was a blend of state funding, federal funding, state loan programs, private investment, impact investment, philanthropy. It was a whole blended stack, which enabled us to raise the fund that gets emptied at the beginning of each growing season to pay incentives, and then gets replenished by selling these outcomes to the different buyers. And so the results of this particular venture, I think it's been a kind of a remarkable story in scaling, where that circular structure of you're raising the fund, paying the farmers, verifying the outcomes, and then selling them, which again replenishes the fund and repays our investors. Over 100,000 tons of CO2 just last year, almost 2 million pounds of nitrogen, and then over 100,000 pounds of reduced phosphorus. And so this particular example, where we're hoping to reach over a dozen states and 200,000 acres this year, and won a EPA Pisces Award last year, I think this is a really remarkable example where our partners had an idea that they had designed and they had proven, maybe one or two demonstration projects, and we helped them scale that to another magnitude. And this one is something we see that is proven to be self-sufficient financially, and we're hoping to continue, or we will continue, and hope to scale up into further states and more acres going forward. George, hand it over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, good morning to all. And George Kelly, Managing Director at Quantified Ventures. Really excited to be here today. I think one of the things you've heard today is we felt it important to kind of give you a sense of what a challenge is and some of the results that can give you a kind of a sense of the direction that we're going to be taking in this challenge. As Todd mentioned, we're really focused on water scarcity in the Colorado River Basin. And I think we all know, and I want to first acknowledge a lot of the folks on this call have already done a lot of work and are most familiar with a lot of these issues. And really what we're trying to do is build on and translate a lot of the work that's been done today to on-the-ground solutions. There's a real sense of urgency with this challenge. And so I don't think we need to go in too much detail relative to the context, other than the fact that we all know that there's huge urban growth, consistent shortfalls, historically low reservoirs. You compound that with climate change. We're looking at Lake Mead at 27% of capacity. Lake Powell is at 28% of capacity. We know that relative to the policy side of the equation, we have the Colorado River Drought Contingency Plan looming. We've had announcements from the Bureau of Reclamation recently saying that they're going to look for 2 to 4 million acre feet of water being cut by next year. They're looking for 60-day plans right now up to August. We've already cut Arizona and Nevada's water use. And so there's a huge sense of urgency. But on the flip side of all this, we also know there's some impediments to what we want to do in trying to create solutions to these problems. Things like water rights and state laws that perhaps have bearing on our ability to create solutions. One other point I'll mention is there's pending legislation in Congress called the Watershed Results Act, and I think it really does. I bear mentioning, mainly because what that act is doing, and it's they just had a hearing on May 25th in Congress on this act. But that act is basically looking at creating funds tied to outcomes. And this is kind of the heart. We're going to get, I'm going to come back to this, the heart of the challenge about looking at outcomes and trying to really focus on the end solution here, which is water scarcity. Finally, on the funding and financing side of the equation, there's a lot of money coming down the pipe. We know that state revolving funds are flush with cash, whether it's drinking water or the clean water side of the equation. You have the infrastructure bill. California just announced $5.1 billion under state law to address drought conditions, and they're looking to have 2.9 billion of that to pay farmers to cut planting. So we know that's out there, but what we want is also to look at the private side of the equation and to leverage financing if we can. And oftentimes what happens is that you're unable to integrate the public and private dynamic, and we're really interested in leveraging all the pools of funding we can to create the scalability that Todd mentioned. Next slide, please, Matt. So let's get in terms of again, I'm going to come back to the challenge with that context to say our goal is to drive these measurable outcomes through cost-effective solutions. And we want to optimize these solutions. And what we want to do is create a system that, similar to what Congress is looking at, how can we focus on those prioritized projects that provide the best benefits for the least cost. And we know that when you're talking water scarcity, you're really talking water demand on one side and then water supply enhancement on the other. And we're going to be looking for both of those components. And I'll have a few more tidbits on that. As Todd kind of went through this blended capital side of the equation, the idea is we want to promote that leveraging and the pooling of all the funding that we can get. And oftentimes the criteria for public funding don't match the private side of the equation. And it gets very siloed, and we're going to be looking to promote blending if possible. And then finally, this replicability, scalability approach is something that's going to be important. Can it translate on the ground to the community at large? And we want an equitable component. We really want a co-benefit tied to equity if possible. Next slide. So when we talk about what this challenge involves, it really covers Quantified Ventures' time and effort in trying to drive value for your either businesses or projects. relative to these kind of issues. And the bullets both in that below in this slide kind of give you a sense of some of the representative types of activities that Quantified Ventures can do, helping on validating size and scope and the objectives of a project, engaging with experts and stakeholders, validating economic cost benefit and financial models, designing transactions or programs or outcome metrics and pricing and payment terms, coordinating and mediating both internal and external stakeholders, undertaking partner, funder, and investor outreach, and developing technical memoranda and presentations to facilitate diligence. These are the kind of things that we are representative. They don't necessarily represent all of the potential scenarios, but as Todd mentioned, we're looking to provide these kind of services to support these endeavors and normally it's for up to a year and up to potentially 3 projects or ventures. Next slide, please. So in terms of what we have what's called a request for statement of interest, and that is on our website and in this announcement. The representative applicants, there really are few who are not eligible. You can see local governments, utilities, agencies, conservancy districts, water boards, special districts. I do want to mention we're also interested in ventures and companies, and also any other organizations in the context mentioned tied to this Colorado River Basin initiative. From an organizational characteristic, though, what we really want to see is groups that are oriented to try to promote innovation, are really targeted on that blending and pooling of capital, and our position in the fundraising position to raise capital as well, and where we think we can get buy-in from stakeholders. And we're really looking for investable solutions that were for projects or enterprises that can be initiated in late 2022 or early 2023. When we talk about demand management and supply enhancement, we're just giving you a list of some of representative examples of some of the practices that might be out there: water renewal or reuse, water efficiencies, optimization of water flows to achieve ecological outcomes, alternative farm practices, groundwater recharge, land management, habitat conservation, watershed restoration, evaporation or water loss or control. And some fit within the demand management side, some fit in the supply enhancement. And these are only representative, and I think many on this call probably have a list that goes further than this, but we just wanted to give you a sense of kind of the orientation of the types of projects we're looking at. Next slide. So in this request for statement of interest, there are 5 components in that, and I think the main element in terms of the submission components is we're going to be looking for an executive summary, project scope and fit, organizational capabilities, the impact, and then an appendix, which typically could be letters of support and otherwise. You will note we've kind of included the evaluation criteria here to just give you a sense of our orientation. The project scope and fit is the largest component here, with expected outcomes tied to water scarcity being the largest of that in terms of our orientation. But hopefully this gives you a sense of kind of our orientation in terms of evaluating what comes in. Next slide. So in terms of the request for statement of interest, as you can see, the notice of intent to apply that is optional, but it is recommended and preferred is July 15th if possible. It is not obligatory that be the case. As you heard from Todd earlier, we welcome conversations. So this is somewhat of an informal dynamic here where we're going to have Jason Lee as our point of contact, and that information is in the RSI. And we urge you to all to pick up the phone and call. But the notice of intent to apply July 15th, and then proposal submission due dates is August 19th. And again, we're anticipating that you're going to be asking for help before that time frame, so we can help shape that submission. And then September 19th, we select the organizations and notify those winning organizations. I will say our goal here is to get projects on the ground that solve water scarcity issues, and that to the extent we don't select either a project or an organization or a venture, it doesn't mean that that is the end of it. Meaning we have affiliates that we think could plausibly play a role for some of the non-selected opportunities. And there's also additional sources of funding that we think are out there. So we don't feel that's the end, but we have a limited scope of dollars, and we're going to be targeting our efforts. But I only point out that I think there's real opportunities for us to grow that side. Matt, the last point here in terms of the announcement, will you go back to that prior slide? I just want to make sure everybody is aware that it's going to be fall of 2022 when the selected organizations begin. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Matt to moderate our Q&A, and thank you for being here today.
Thanks, George, and thanks everyone. We got 10 minutes left or so. So we welcome any questions. You can put them in the chat and we'd welcome folks. I can read them out, or we'd welcome folks to unmute themselves and ask questions as well. I know Allison had a question early on about ROI model, and that may have been answered in the case studies or other elements of the presentation. Allison, is there anything you want to clarify?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that did help clarify my question, especially I think Todd touched upon it in terms of his description of what a B corporation was. Thank you.
I was having mute button issues. Thank you. Raquel asked about the proposal template. It is online. Raquel, we can put it in the read if you want to drop it in the chat, but it's on the web page that we have set up. We're actually going to have an online form where you can submit by the deadlines. The form isn't there, but there's a PDF document with the statement of interest. Thanks, Reed. That goes into a little more detail, and again, is supplementary to the presentation today.
And again, like we've stressed throughout, please reach out. You know, we want to enter into a dialogue. You know, for us, the real value of the next 4 months of what we call the outreach and selection phase is getting conversations going to identify projects, form partnerships, and involve us in that. And we can shape the thinking and help shape the proposals that are coming to us. That's what we've done in every challenge that we've run. Even though ultimately we will be picking the projects, we want to be part of that process.
Any other questions for the group? Again, we can take them offline, but if there is anything, we'd welcome. We got Todd, George, and Jason, our experts here, so they're welcome to. We'll be here for the next couple of minutes. If there are questions, put them in the chat. If not, we can give people a few minutes back. Amy asked about I think I see a hand from Will. Amy asked about guidelines or concerns about sharing this. We have a public website. You're welcome to share it. We're happy to have conversations, and this opportunity is open. As George talked about, we talked about ventures. We've worked with municipalities. We've worked with different nonprofit organizations, for-profits. So we're open to ideas. Again, Quantified Ventures through the innovative funding and financing, we think we can help really capitalize and scale some of these solutions, and welcome input connections with those of you who've been working on these on the ground for a long period of time. But please share. I think Jason just summarized in 3 words what I said in 55. But thanks, Jason. Will, did you want to ask a question? That's not in chat, please. You're welcome.
Oh yeah, sure. My video is not working though, so I apologize. Jason, I want to give a shout out to Duke. I believe you were a MEM candidate or MEM grad as well. I was 99, so I think I'll be reaching out to you and talking more about this, but I did want to ask for some clarification in terms of how you guys partner with other consultants, because I'm a consultant myself and do some of this work and have some collaborators in Colorado that we're trying to look for partners as well. So are you guys, I'm kind of unclear about how the financing works for your potential consultant partners. Like, I understand, you know, you have funding to cover you guys' time, but does that in your partnership relationships then include other consultants, or could you elaborate a little bit on that?
So we have funding through this challenge to cover our work on the projects, and there certainly may be a role for consultants on the projects themselves, but that really depends on, you know, the budgets for those projects, and that's more up to the organizations who are driving them. And we're always excited and to collaborate and open to discussion. So, you know, please reach out to Jason and others, and let's, you know, share ideas about opportunities.
Yeah, cool. I mean, my colleagues and I are in the process of reaching out to water agencies. We developed a tool doing scenario forecasting for water demand to 2050, which could be helpful for you guys when you're approaching agencies and partners. So Jason, I'll contact you offline and contact my partner and see if we can arrange some time to talk.
Yeah, awesome. Looking forward to it.
Great, thanks.
Great. I see a couple more. Jody had a question, and Aaron, I know you have a hand raised too. Jody asked, are there examples of multi-sector project ideas from other challenges?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So that I think the multi-sector projects, you know, if you have one and you feel like it'd be feasible and it fits into either or any of the design, capitalize, and scale, we're definitely open to that. I think the guiding star for this one is solutions, projects, ventures that address water scarcity. And so, you know, I think one example of a multi-sector one that I think is really interesting is the Soil and Water Outcomes Fund, which was the scaling example from this presentation, where it was a private landowner, you know, corporations were buyers. The funding and financing came from a mix of federal and state and philanthropic and private investment dollars. So, you know, I think we're not being too prescriptive about, you know, public sector only, private sector only. You know, multi-sector is totally fine. And in a lot of cases, as I'm sure you know, we're seeing a lot of the innovative solutions come out of multi-sector collaborations in projects. So.
Thanks, Jason. And I just really want to emphasize that thinking, right? So, especially in the Western landscape, that public lands, private conservation initiatives like ongoing land trust activities, there's just lots of opportunities there to do scalable solutions across sectors. So appreciate what you all are doing.
Thanks, Jody.
Thanks, Jody. Aaron, so I'll give you, you asked about, do projects have to have a potential financial return? There could be a cost savings as opposed to a direct financial return, but I'll give you the floor too to see if you have anything to add to what you put in the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I mean, I think we do a lot of work in all of the sort of example spaces that you mentioned. I don't know that any of it is going to generate a financial return or cost savings for a third party. So I'm just curious if that's like a gatekeeping criteria or not, if there are other, environmental or other quantifiable returns, or if you're only looking for those sort of investable return generating solutions.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Aaron, it really, it depends on the project, but in general, we think of ROI more broadly, that you might secure funding from government sources for a project. So we have to prove the case to government that the benefits of the project, the outcomes justify that cost. There may be financing as part of the upfront capital. And in financing, there's two components. There's whoever is providing the financing. So we have to demonstrate the return to them, whether it's debt or equity. But then there's the repayments of that financing. So we have to demonstrate the return to the payers who are repaying it. So it's ROI, we're always calculating it, but how we do it and what the answer is, it really depends on their role in the transaction and the type of capital that they're providing. But we don't mean it as just very narrowly that we're only looking for projects that are going to be financed by private investors and therefore that deliver a return to private investors. That's not the case.
And I would add to that, to Todd's comment, that the scalability and the replicability is going to be an important issue as well. Meaning, the more we're higher on that scale, the ROI component becomes a lesser focal point.
Well, thanks everyone for your time today. We just hit the top of the hour, and I've never been in a webinar that actually did that. So we're going to end it here, and appreciate your time very much. Reach out to our team with ideas, connections, opportunities, just to chat. Again, we have a couple months here of this cycle to figure out what's what together, and appreciate your time and hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.